From rags to riches, and back, dating a billionaire taught me what money can't buy. I grew up poor and had a tough life, but I stayed passionate about my dreams, and studies dating someone rich changed everything for a while, taught me a lesson I'll know.
I grew up, well, let's just say financially challenged is a polite understatement. My childhood home was a cramped two-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the sound of sirens was more common than birdsong. My mum worked double shifts as a waitress, and my dad was a ghost, a series of broken promises and fleeting appearances. We scraped by, always one paycheck away from disaster. New shoes were a luxury, vacations was something you saw on TV, and organic was a word reserved for biology class. I wasn't stupid though. I was a good student, a voracious reader, and I had this burning, almost desperate desire to escape the life I was born into. I devoured books about history, science, art, anything that could transport me to a different world, a world where possibilities weren't limited by your zip code. I saw education as my only ticket out, so I busted my ass. Straight A's. Extracurriculars, the whole shebang. I knew I needed a scholarship to even dream of college, and I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. My hard work paid off. I got a full ride to a decent state university, not an Ivy League school, but a solid institution with a respectable reputation. It was enough. It was my lifeline. College was an experience. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who hadn't grown up worrying about eviction notices or whether they could afford groceries. They talked about summering in Europe, ski trips to Aspen, and trust funds like they were discussing the weather. I felt like an alien, a spy from a different planet trying to blend in. I worked part-time at the campus library to make ends meet. The scholarship covered tuition and fees, but I still needed money for books, food, and the occasional desperately needed night out with friends. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it kept me afloat. That's where I met her. Isabel. Even her name sounded expensive. She was everything I wasn't. Confident, sophisticated, effortlessly stylish. She wore clothes that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and she had this aura of privilege that was both intimidating and, strangely, alluring. She was studying art history, and she spent hours in the library poring over enormous coffee table books filled with masterpieces. I noticed her first. How could I not? She was like a splash of vibrant color in my grayscale world. She, on the other hand, probably didn't even register my existence for weeks. I was just another anonymous face behind the circulation desk, another cog in the university machine. Then, one day, she asked me for help finding a particular book on Renaissance architecture. I knew exactly where it was, and I led her to the shelf. We started talking, small talk at first, about the book, about the class, about the professor. But gradually, the conversations became longer, more personal. I learned that Isabel was from a ridiculously wealthy family. Her father was a real estate mogul, her mother a philanthropist. They had a sprawling estate in Connecticut, a penthouse in Manhattan, and a villa in the south of France. Her life was a whirlwind of galas, art auctions, and exotic vacations. I also learned that she was bored with the endless parties, bored with the superficial conversations, bored with the suffocating expectations of her family. She craved something real, something authentic, and, for whatever reason, she thought she found it in me. I was skeptical, of course. I couldn't understand what someone like her saw in someone like me, but she was persistent. She invited me to coffee, then to lunch, then to a concert. I kept expecting her to realize her mistake, to get tired of my mundane existence and move on to someone more. suitable, but she didn't. Against all odds, we started dating. It was surreal. One minute I was eating ramen in my tiny dorm room. The next I was dining at Michelin-starred restaurants. One minute I was taking the bus to campus. The next I was being chauffeured in a limousine. One minute I was worrying about paying my bills. The next I was being offered a shopping spree at Saks Fifth Avenue. Isabel introduced me to a world I never knew existed, a world of unimaginable luxury and privilege. I met her parents, who were surprisingly gracious, if a little bemused. They treated me with polite curiosity, like I was some exotic pet she had adopted. Her friends, on the other hand, were less subtle. They were beautiful, impeccably dressed, and relentlessly judgmental. They whispered behind my back, made snide comments about my clothes, and generally made it clear that I didn't belong. I felt like an imposter, a fraud who had somehow managed to infiltrate their exclusive club. Isabel, to her credit, tried to shield me from their negativity. She defended me, stood up for me, and insisted that they give me a chance. But it was exhausting, constantly having to prove myself, constantly feeling like I was being scrutinized, constantly wondering if I was good enough. And then there was the money. Oh, the money. It was everywhere. It permeated everything. It was like the air they breathed, the water they drank, the very foundation of their existence. They didn't just have money. They were defined by it. Their worth, their value, their identity, it was all tied to their wealth. Isabel tried to be generous, but her generosity often felt patronizing. She offered to pay off my student loans, buy me a new car, set me up with a trust fund. I refused, of course. I couldn't accept it. It felt wrong, like I was selling myself, compromising my values. But it was tempting. God, it was tempting. To have all my financial worries vanish in an instant, to be able to focus on my studies without having to worry about working, to finally escape the cycle of poverty that had haunted my family for generations. I started to resent her wealth. Even though I knew it wasn't her fault, I resented the ease with which she navigated the world, the opportunities she took for granted, the safety net she never had to worry about. I resented the fact that she could never truly understand what it was like to struggle, to sacrifice, to live on the edge. Our relationship became strained. We argued more frequently about everything and nothing. I accused her of being insensitive. She accused me of being ungrateful. We were two people from completely different worlds, trying to build a bridge that was simply too wide to cross. And then the inevitable happened. We went on a trip to her family's villa in the south of France. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway, a chance to reconnect and rekindle our relationship. Instead, it was a disaster. The villa was opulent, extravagant, a monument to excess. It had a private beach, a swimming pool, a tennis court, a wine cellar stocked with the finest vintages, and a staff of servants catering to our every whim. I felt suffocated. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was living a lie, that I was playing a part in a movie that wasn't my own. I tried to relax, to enjoy the beauty of the surroundings, but I couldn't shake the sense of unease that gnawed at me. One evening, we were invited to a dinner party at a neighboring estate. The guests were all wealthy, sophisticated, and utterly boring. They talked about art, politics, and real estate, but their conversations were shallow and meaningless. They seemed more interested in impressing each other than in actually connecting. I felt like an outsider, a voyeur observing a strange and alien ritual. I tried to engage in the conversation, but my attempts fell flat. I didn't know the right names, the right places, the right prices. I was out of my depth. After dinner, as we were walking back to the villa, I finally snapped. "I can't do this anymore," I said, my voice trembling. Isabel stopped and looked at me, her eyes filled with confusion. "What do you mean, this?" I said, gesturing around us. "This whole charade, this fake world. I don't belong here, Isabel. I never will." She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed. "I knew this was too good to be true," she said softly. "It's not you," I said, trying to soften the blow. "It's me. I can't change who I am. I can't pretend to be someone I'm not." "Maybe I was trying to change you," she admitted. "Maybe I thought I could bring you into my world. And maybe I was trying to change you," I said. "Maybe I thought I could bring you into mine." We stood there in silence, the only sound the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. We both knew it was over. The next morning, I packed my bags and left. Isabel didn't try to stop me. We said goodbye with a brief, awkward hug, and then I was gone. I went back to my cramped dorm room, my part-time job, and my ramen noodles. It felt good. It felt like coming home. Life wasn't easy, of course. I still had to struggle, to work hard, to make sacrifices. But I was free. Free from the suffocating expectations of Isabel's world. Free from the constant pressure to conform. Free to be myself. I finished college, got a decent job, and eventually built a comfortable life for myself. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't extravagant, but it was mine. I earned it. I deserved it. I never saw Isabel again. Years later, I read an article about her in a magazine. She had married a wealthy businessman, inherited her father's real estate empire, and become a prominent philanthropist. She was living the life she was always destined to live. I felt a pang of something, not regret exactly, more like nostalgia, a wistful longing for a different life, a life I could have had, but ultimately didn't want. Dating Isabel taught me a valuable lesson.
Dating Isabel taught me a valuable lesson. It taught me that money doesn't buy happiness. It taught me that true wealth lies not in what you have, but in who you are. It taught me that the most important things in life, love, friendship, purpose, can't be bought or sold. I was poor, yes, but I also had something that Isabel and her friends didn't. Resilience, determination, and a deep appreciation for the things I had. I knew what it was like to struggle, to overcome adversity, to build something from nothing. And that made me richer than any trust fund ever could. For a long time after the breakup, I harbored a quiet resentment towards the wealthy. I saw them as out of touch, entitled, and fundamentally incapable of understanding the struggles of ordinary people. I became hyper-aware of the inequalities in society, the vast chasm that separated the haves from the have-nots. This resentment, while understandable, was also limiting. It blinded me to the complexities of individual people, reducing them to caricatures based on their socioeconomic status. I started to judge people before I even knew them, assuming the worst based on their clothes, their cars, their accents. It took me a while to realize that I was doing the very thing I resented others for doing to me, making assumptions based on superficial appearances. I was so focused on the differences between myself and the wealthy that I failed to see our shared humanity. This realization came slowly, gradually, through a series of humbling experiences. I started volunteering at a local soup kitchen, where I met people from all walks of life, including some who were far worse off than I ever had been. I listened to their stories, their struggles, their hopes, and their dreams. I also started working with a mentor who had built a successful business from the ground up. He wasn't born wealthy, but he had worked hard, taken risks, and created opportunities for himself and others. He taught me the importance of perseverance, resilience, and giving back to the community. Through these experiences, I began to understand that wealth is not inherently evil. It's a tool, a resource that can be used for good or for ill. Some wealthy people are indeed out of touch and entitled, but others are generous, compassionate, and committed to making a positive impact on the world. I also realized that my own resentment was, in part, a defense mechanism. It was easier to dismiss the wealthy as inherently flawed than to confront my own insecurities and feelings of inadequacy. It was easier to blame them for my problems than to take responsibility for my own life. Coming to terms with these uncomfortable truths was a difficult process, but it was also liberating. It allowed me to let go of my anger, to forgive Isabel and myself, and to move forward with a more open and compassionate heart. I started to focus on building my own life, on achieving my own goals, on creating my own version of success. I worked hard at my job, saved my money, and invested wisely. I volunteered my time, mentored young people, and supported causes I believed in. Slowly but surely, I started to create a life that was both meaningful and fulfilling. It wasn't the life I had imagined when I first met Isabel, but it was a life that was authentically my own. I also started to reevaluate my definition of wealth. I realized that true wealth is not just about money. It's about health, relationships, experiences, and the ability to make a positive impact on the world. And then, one day, I received an unexpected invitation. It was a letter from Isabel's assistant, inviting me to an art exhibition in New York City. The exhibition was showcasing the work of emerging artists, and Isabel was a major sponsor. I hesitated. I hadn't seen or spoken to Isabel in years. I wasn't sure if I wanted to reopen that chapter of my life, but curiosity got the better of me. I decided to go. The exhibition was held in a trendy gallery in Soho. The room was filled with art lovers, collectors, and socialites. I felt a familiar pang of anxiety as I navigated the crowd, feeling like an outsider once again. And then, I saw her. Isabel. She looked older, more mature, but still undeniably beautiful. She was surrounded by people, but her eyes scanned the room, as if she was looking for someone. Our eyes met. For a moment, we just stared at each other, 1,000 unspoken words hanging in the air. Then, she smiled. It was a genuine, heartfelt smile, the kind I hadn't seen in a long time. She excused herself from her conversation and walked towards me. "It's good to see you," she said, her voice soft. "It's good to see you too," I replied. We talked for a long time that evening, catching up on each other's lives. She told me about her marriage, children work. I told her about my career, my volunteer work, my travels. We talked about the past, about our relationship, about the mistakes we had made. We apologized to each other, forgave each other, and finally, put the past to rest. I learned that Isabel had changed too. She had grown, matured, and developed a deeper understanding of the world. She had used her wealth to make a positive impact, supporting artists, funding scholarships, and advocating for social justice. She was no longer the spoiled, entitled socialite I had once known. As the evening drew to a close, she said something that stayed with me long after I left. "You know, say dating you was one of the most important experiences of my life. It forced me to confront my own privilege, to question my values, and to see the world through a different lens. I'm grateful for that." I smiled. "Me too," I said. "Me too." We hugged goodbye, and I walked out into the night, feeling a sense of peace and closure I hadn't felt in years. That night, I realized that life is not about escaping your past. It's about learning from it, growing from it, and using it to create a better future. It's not about denying your roots. It's about honoring them, embracing them, and using them to fuel your dreams. It's not about comparing yourself to others. It's about focusing on your own journey, your own values, and your own definition of success. And it's not about being rich or poor. It's about being kind, compassionate, and committed to making a positive impact on the world. That's the real life lesson I learned from dating a rich person. And it's a lesson I'll never forget. Few years after that, I met someone else. Her name was Maria. Maria was a librarian, a quiet, unassuming woman with a gentle smile and a passion for books. She wasn't wealthy in the traditional sense. She lived in a small apartment, drove an old car, and spent her free time volunteering at the local community center. But Maria was rich in other ways. She was rich in kindness, in compassion, in empathy. She had a deep understanding of human nature, a remarkable ability to listen without judgment, and a genuine desire to help others. We met at a book club meeting. I was initially drawn to her intelligence and her insightful comments about the books we were reading. But as I got to know her better, I realized that there was so much more to her than met the eye. Maria had overcome a lot of adversity in her life. She had grown up in poverty, struggled with health issues, and lost loved ones too soon. But through it all, she had maintained a positive attitude, a resilient spirit, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. She inspired me. She challenged me. She made me want to be a better person. We started dating, and our relationship quickly deepened. We shared a love of books, a passion for social justice, and a desire to make a difference in the world. With Maria, there were no fancy restaurants, no lavish vacations, no expensive gifts. Our dates consisted of walks in the park, picnics in the garden, and cozy nights in reading together. But those simple moments were more meaningful than any of the extravagant experiences I had shared with Isabel. They were real, authentic, and filled with genuine connection. Maria taught me that true love is not about material possessions. It's about sharing your life with someone who understands you, supports you, and loves you for who you are. She also taught me that true happiness is not about chasing external validation. It's about finding joy in the simple things, appreciating the beauty of the world around you, and cultivating inner peace. One day, we were volunteering at the community center, helping to organize a book drive for underprivileged children. As I watched Maria interact with the children, her face lit up with joy, I realized that I was deeply in love with her. I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I proposed to her that evening, under a starlit sky in the park. She said yes. Our wedding was small and simple, but it was filled with love, laughter, and joy. We invited our closest friends and family, and we celebrated our union with a potluck dinner at the community center. It wasn't a lavish affair, but it was perfect. Marrying Maria was the best decision I ever made. She brought so much love, joy, and meaning into my life. She taught me the true meaning of wealth, the true meaning of happiness, and the true meaning of love. We built a life together based on shared values, mutual respect, and unwavering support. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were rich in other ways. We were rich in love, in friendship and purpose. We were rich in the things that truly mattered. Sometimes, the greatest treasures are not found in the most obvious places. Sometimes, the richest people are not the ones with the most money. Sometimes, the most valuable lessons are learned from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes, the greatest love stories are not the ones that begin with wealth and privilege, but the ones that blossom in the most humble of circumstances.